Before Nintendo released the NES on October 18th, 1985, Nintendo had a bunch of different arcade games that were made back in the 1970s and 80s. Some arcade games were released in North America, some of them never left Japan. Today, I'll be going over my top 5 unique arcade games you probably never heard of. Let's get started. Number 5, Monkey Magic. Released in Japan on October 1979, the main objective of this game is for the player to use their paddle and ball to destroy the giant monkey head on the top of the screen. This game is pretty much a Breakout clone, and Breakout was released 3 years earlier than Monkey Magic. People thought that Donkey Kong was the first primate introduced in a Nintendo game, but no, it was actually Monkey Magic. In fact, there were a lot of Nintendo games in the 70s and 80s that involved monkeys, and don't even get me started on the Monkey Ball games. So why was this game only released in Japan and not the US? Well, it's kind of hard to see what exactly is going on in the game, but you're essentially destroying the monkey's face whenever you hit the ball towards the blocks on the top of the screen. I feel like parents would have problems seeing their kids playing and try to destroy a monkey's face. Eventually, Nintendo released a more normal version similar to Monkey Magic called Alleyway that was released on the Game Boy in 1989. Basic game, but very addictive and fun to play. Number 4, Space Firebird. The name alone sounds pretty badass. This game, in my opinion, looks like a cross between Galaga and Phoenix. The game was published by Sega Gremlin, a company that went down under during the video game crash of the 1980s. You play the role of a ship while flying through space accidentally awakens a swarm of enemy firebirds. You then take control of the ship and start to mow them down with your guns. A common theme that you'll see before Donkey Kong got released is Nintendo jumping in on the space game hype that was happening. Nintendo was guilty for releasing a bunch of space games in the 1970s and 80s. The space game genre has already been overused. Number 3, Radarscope. Radarscope is a space game that has a really interesting backstory. The player assumes the role of a sonic spaceport starship and must wipe out formations of an enemy race known as the Gamma Raiders before they destroy the planet's space station. Gameplay is very similar to Space Invaders and Galaxian, but viewed from a 3D third-person perspective. Radarscope was a commercial failure and created a financial crisis for the subsidiary of Nintendo of America. Its president, Arakawa, pleaded for his father-in-law, Nintendo president at the time, Yamauchi, to send him a game that could convert and salvage thousands of unsold Radarscope machines. This prompted the creation of Donkey Kong. Radarscope is one of the first video game projects for artist Miyamoto and for composer Tanaka. Retrospectively, critics have praised Radarscope for its gameplay and design being a unique iteration upon the Space Invaders template. One critic labeled it one of Nintendo's most important games because its commercial failure inadvertently led to the creation of Nintendo's mascot character and helped pave the way for the company's entry into the console video game market. Number 2, Space Launcher. I swear this will be my final space arcade game review. Space Launcher was released in 1979, and surprisingly, this was an original game that Nintendo came up with. A lot of games like Monkey Magic or Radarscope got ideas from other games, but Space Launcher is a unique game that involves maneuvering around space objects and dodge incoming enemy fire from the aliens that are stationed above. There are also treasures at the top, and your goal is to fly up, grab the treasure, and come soaring back down, after which you must repeat it until all the treasures have been collected. As you can see from the gameplay, this looks very similar to Frogger, but is not a clone since it predates it by almost 2 years. The game was a commercial success, and part of the reason why is that the game looks very similar to Star Wars. Game poster looked similar to Star Wars, even the yellow logo shared the same similarity. Number 1, Laser Clay Shooting System. This was the very first video game that Nintendo team put together that led the company's entry into the video game market. Sometime in the early 70s, Gunpei Yokoi suggested the use of light guns to Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi. He had become interested in light guns after purchasing a rifle and bringing it to a ski shooting range. Yamauchi, trusting Yokoi's good judgment, purchased several unused bowling alleys that had closed after the initial hype surrounding the sport dwindled. Americans have introduced bowling to the Japanese after World War II, and it subsequently became a popular sport. This success didn't last for long, and when the attendance dropped, the owners of the alleys had to shut down. Unfortunately, this game only got released in Japan and didn't really expand to different places because of the 1973 oil embargo made its way to Japan and affected their entire economy. And Yokoi had to figure out a way to cut costs or Nintendo would go out of business. But there was some good news. Nintendo was already listed on the stock market, and many of the shareholders still believe in Nintendo's direction of focusing in the electronic entertainment industry. Now, this is an important question. Is the laser clay shooting system actually an arcade game? I mean, the game took up an entire bowling alley, and when you think of arcade games, you think of something smaller. But let me know in the comment section if you would consider the laser clay shooting system an arcade game. Later on in 1974, Yamauchi redesigned the laser clay shooting system into a smaller version and renamed it to Mini Laser Clay. Even though it was called Mini Laser Clay, the arcade game still took up a bunch of floor space, but it was widely popular. It went through some different modifications, and later on in 1974, Wild Gunman arcade game was born. Thanks for watching.